We design and fly airplane. You know that there is a very few country in the world that can do that.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky as Canadians. We can do from A to Z. We can design an airplane, we can build it here, and we know how to fly it. There's about 5 countries in the world that can do it from the beginning.
Welcome to Speaking of Business, conversations with Canadian innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders. I'm Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. I often talk on this podcast about Canadian champions. How can we build more homegrown companies that can compete with the best in the world? If there's a playbook, it might be found at Bombardier. Just think about the innovation that has come out of the Montreal-based company for more than 80 years. It started by revolutionizing winter travel with the Skidoo. In the 1970s, Bombardier moved into train travel at a time when mass transit was burgeoning in North American cities. And now, it's on the forefront of aviation. Go to any airport in the world, and you're likely to see a Bombardier jet. The innovation, research, and development that keeps Bombardier on the cutting edge happens right here in Canada. That translates into thousands of high-paying Canadian jobs and billions of dollars contributing to Canada's GDP. I don't think there's anyone prouder of Bombardier's success than its president and CEO, Éric Martel. Welcome to the podcast, Éric.
Yeah, thank you, Goldie, for having me here.
It's so good to have you here. We know each other well, so I know that I want to drill down to a number of issues that you care about. But let's start first and foremost with you. You personally, I love reading the fact that it seems kind of cliche-ish given you're running Bombardier, but you wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah, I wanted to. It's a good
what
question.
Happened?
What happened? So maybe just to give you a bit of context. So I come from a very modest environment, grew up, and when I was a teenager, I was in the cadets. I will always say, actually, this was probably as important as going to regular school. I learned a lot there. This is where I had my first leadership experience. Being, knowledgeable about the movement, I went during my summer job. We're all in the cadets. I went to summer camp there. And then at the end of my high school, I said, what do I do? So I registered to go to military college, but I wanted to be a pilot. And unfortunately, in those years, that goes back to the 80s, my highs were not strong enough. And they said, unfortunately,
not going to happen.
It's not going to happen, man. So I was disappointed, of course. I was devastated, to be honest. And I decided not to join the Army then. I said, I changed my plan and I went to, Laval University. I'm an electrical engineer. So this is the reason why I'm not a pilot today, but I'm in the aerospace business.
But you're in the aerospace business for sure. I want to ask you more about that. But first, you just mentioned how cadets were influential from a perspective of leadership. Tell me what you learned as back then about leadership.
This is an amazing opportunity when you're a teenager. First of all, you're still learning about yourself. You don't know who you are completely. And I was exposed at 13 years old, to be in front of a class and teaching kids of my age, sometimes a bit younger. And then you go to the summer camp. They say you're going to be a surgeon this summer, and then you're responsible for 50 kids, 30 kids. And I ended up being the master chief of the camp in Valcartier. I was 18 years old, responsible for 2,000 people.
Wow.
So I learned a lot about myself then, so about what it is to be a leader. I made a mistake, and that was okay. I learned about it, and I was always saying, even if I have a bad leader in front of me, I need to learn from that. Because, sometimes you have bosses or people you say, hey,
awful.
Why are terrible? Why are they doing
Well, they don't say that about you and me, but somewhere else.
Maybe they do. But I was always thinking that way and say, what do I learn from something that I don't want to do to my people? And the people are very important as you become a leader. We'll talk about it, I'm sure, later. But this was, for me, like as important as I said, to learn about me and to learn about my ability to be a leader and how to be a good leader also.
Yeah. I think we discount how important early childhood and
it is.
Early experiences in life are. You mentioned that you failed.
Yeah.
Can you think of the lessons you learned from that?
Yeah. But it gives me opportunity. There's things there that I've made that, I learned about not doing after, when you become a leader, especially when you're young, you want to put your authority in place.
Authority and power.
Show and power. That's the worst thing to do. You learn that later. But it gives me a bit of an edge because when I started my career, my first job, I remember, I had like just a small group of people. I was a supervisor at Procter & Gamble on the shop floor. And I knew already a bit about leadership, probably more than I taught myself. It went very well. And, to the point where just a couple of years later, I was a plant manager, and I learned to manage big group of people. So I was not even 30. I had like 1,000 people, under my responsibility.
That's half what you had when you were 18 at the cadets.
Exactly. But it's actually something you have to learn, because it's different managing a group of 50 professionals, in an office, than managing a group of people that today, are in different time zone, different culture. So you need to learn that. And the sooner you learn this, because you always make mistake at first, the more helpful it is later in your career.
Yeah. Now, speaking of career, you mentioned you were at Procter & Gamble there, P&G, for a while. How did you make your way into Bombardier? When did that happen?
So Procter & Gamble decided to close the plant. I went to Kraft for a couple of years. Fantastic experience. I learned so much in these two jobs. I was I love managing, and I was a production supervisor, working on 3 shifts, night shift, day shift, afternoon. And also I had a job of project engineer on the shop floor. So I love the manufacturing environment. And I ended up in aerospace at Pratt & Whitney, Canada, just a few years later. And then I worked with Rolls-Royce and then joined Bombardier. And you know probably that I joined Bombardier for 15 years. And, I run the whole operation at the beginning on the train side. A lot of people think I was always in aerospace. But I went to train. They asked me to come back to aerospace, for many years. And then I left, and went to manage Hydro-Quebec for about 5 years. And then came back as CEO of Bombardier.
And since you've come back, you've been really pushing the envelope on a number of things, particularly in aviation innovation. Talk to me about where Bombardier is today in its journey.
This is interesting. Innovation has always been in the DNA of our company. This is how we got created. And we're problem solver. Joseph Armand Bombardier, 80 years ago, when he invented the snowmobile, was trying to solve a problem. You may know that one of his kids, passed because he couldn't get to him to the hospital because there was a winter storm.
Oh, I did not know
And
that.
Then he reverted back, and, the guy was a brilliant mechanical engineer. He decided to invent the snowmobile so that this does not happen again. And that's how it started. So he was driven. But again, when I said we're problem solver, you're trying to improve people's life, with technology. And that's what we do today. We do probably, I think, one of the things that is very significant for an engineer. We design and fly airplane. You know that there is a very few country in the world that can do that.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky as Canadians. We can do from A to Z. We can design an airplane, we can build it here, and we know how to fly it. There's about 5 countries in the world that can do it from the beginning. So that's a super advantage also we have, and we can talk later about that.
I'd like to understand.
We should leverage that even more actually. So there's a lot of history there. We started with the military, etc. We learn and learn and learn. And today, that knowledge, resides, not just in Bombardier, but a lot of this resides in our company. And today we make, and I'm not self-promoting Bombardier here, but we make the flagship of the industry. The Global 7500
it's beautiful
is the airplane, that's flying further, higher, faster than anything else, and the quality of the interior is made here. So we should be very proud as Canadians. To your point earlier, I'm flying a lot. I'm traveling a lot because we're exporter. At the same time, we create the job here in this country for most of them, 34,000 jobs in Canada with our supplier. But we are exporting pretty much everything we do. So I'm traveling, and you're right. I'm always proud. I land in an airport. I've never landed in an airport actually right now without seeing a Bombardier plane around. We're always somewhere, and sometimes I was in Teterboro last week in New York. There was at least 50 airplane of us, on the tarmac. So we have.
You got to feel proud.
We feel proud. I say, hey, I'm a Canadian, but we're everywhere. We're everywhere, and we're making this country shining. I hope so. All around the world.
Well, I mentioned the Canadian champions. There's this cultural thing in Canada, it seems sometimes, that we like to rip down the successful, but I'm not sure Canadians feel that way the way we used to think. There's more and more evidence that they actually want to be proud. And I sometimes call this the BlackBerry phenomenon. Like everybody knew a BlackBerry was a Canadian thing. Do you feel that Bombardier is in that place now where Canadians are rooting for it?
Yeah, I think more and more. I think we had our years, where there was some challenges. I think today people understand that, we're an autonomous business. I haven't got any government funding in the last 5 years. It's always been a subject, and there's a lot of urban
Usually we say,
about
get out of
this.
our way.
Yeah.
Just give us the rules.
It's serious, So today I don't even have, I think I have a loan of $200 million that I need to reimburse, to the government, and they're going to make money out of it at the end of the day. So it's actually much less costly than whenever we try to attract foreigner to come and invest here, then we're willing to pay billions of dollars.
And your competition is probably being heavily subsidized in their home countries.
They are significantly, especially by the military side.
Yes.
So U.S. company, French company, they do develop innovation and technology sponsored by defense, put it on military airplane, and then one day it's on the civil airplane that I'm competing with.
Yeah.
So they have a huge advantage there because usually on our side, most of it we're doing it. So there's different ways of getting there. But, we're proud today that we're very autonomous. But I think there's something here to think about also for our country, because we do have amazing people here in innovation. You look at small businesses today, very innovative. And I think a big question we have is, how do we help them to grow and become the next champion? The next, and I know some of them turn
There must be an ecosystem around this.
Exactly. There's an ecosystem of going to the next step. We're pretty good at doing the research and coming up with amazing idea, but the next step of taking these guys and making them national champion is not our best right now. And I think we should think about why and how we do this clearly.
Well, you mentioned the talent. How important is the access to talent for your business and for the growth of your business?
It's absolutely bread and butter, And one of the reasons we're very fortunate of being in Montreal, we have a lot of university. And Toronto is the same thing because we have a significant operation in Toronto. This is where we build a global, actually. We have 22, 24, 500 people. And we can attract engineer. And we can find the quality engineer we need for our business, which is the top of technology. Building an airplane is not easy.
Not easy.
Otherwise, all country would do it.
Yeah.
But we can find these people here. So this is a unique place, and I think we've done a good job, relatively good job as a country to have the school available, have the program that are rich enough, so that we can get these people from here. So in Montreal, if you look at the pro rata of student, versus population, it's one of the highest in North America, probably as high as Boston. So this is something we can tap into. So this is key. I think what I was saying earlier is this is the part where we have all these people that can invent something or create something. How do we help them to go to the next step and get their business going?
Right. We also touched on the fact that you're proudly Canadian, that you're based mostly in Quebec, but lots of roots in rural Quebec, probably where the snowmobile came from, as you mentioned. Had not heard that story. Thank you for sharing that story. Tragedy turned into
innovation.
A solution. And sometimes that's what it takes, unfortunately. But, you could be anywhere in the world. And there's no doubt in my mind that you're probably wooed to settle anywhere in the world. How do you explain the commitment to Canada that Bombardier has shown?
And I think through our history, I'm sure you can understand, we had occasion of going elsewhere.
I'm aware. That's why
other government that approach us and
Yeah.
say, hey, we'll build a plant for you. Yeah. We still have a family that is extremely supportive and still control the company. And they had occasion. But I think they were proud of being here, proud Canadian. They wanted to keep the head office here. They wanted to keep the jobs here. We sell less and less airplane here in Canada. So we sell maybe 2-3% of our airplane, but everything else is exported. So we are an exporter. We're part of the top 10 exporter of this
Story
country.
of Canada, we're just not big enough.
That's exactly. So the market is not big enough, but we are exporting. But the jobs, Bombardier, out of the 18,000 jobs, I have about 12, 13,000 here in Canada. And the rest are outside, but they are supporting, mainly the operation, services center, and things like that. I have one plant in Mexico and one in the U.S., but the main of the job is here in Canada.
Let's talk about how do you foster more Bombardiers? So let's not talk about Bombardier specifically, but in terms of the innovation ecosystem, the need for an industrial policy approach. And we can talk about defense as well, because there's some you would have seen our paper
there. Yeah.
About industrial defense space. How do you see Canada positioning itself?
Well, you just mentioned defense. Defense is clearly something that we used to do as a country that we've lost over the year. Today, we prefer to go and buy a product that is off the shelf. And I think there's a possibility for us today to work better and being more connected with defense and with the industrial and say, what do we need as a country? What do you guys need? And I said it earlier, we're problem solver. What do you need in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road? And we have smart people here. Not just in Bombardier. I do have a lot of smart people in Bombardier, but we can go and there's other company, there's an ecosystem, a very capable company. I'm thinking of GDMS here based in Ottawa. Why do we not get together and say, what are your issues? And I think, to be fair, that dialogue was not existing 2 years ago. I think I've seen in the last 6 months that dialogue starting, but we need to do more of that. I think to start thinking about what are the problems you're trying to solve? What are you looking for? And again, with the capability we have, we can come up with solution in a fairly reasonable time.
Now, in business, of course, you have regulations, you have the role of government, you have industrial policy. All of these things are in play. How do you see the relationship between sort of Bombardier and a federal government? Doesn't matter if it's today's federal government or past federal governments or future federal governments. What is the ideal nature of a relationship between a business and between a government?
Yeah. I think there's a fine line, but I think our politicians are elected to represent our people. We do represent our people too. I have, as I said, 30...
Your customers are their voters.
Exactly.
Your employees are their voters.
Exactly, their voters. So I think we need to connect together and understand how do we make this country successful. It's not about me. It's not about just my company. But, we should be having discussion and continuous dialogue with our champion in this country, not just Bombardier, but we have a lot of other companies that do well. Think about CGI, think about, internationally also.
CAE.
But I think we can, CAE is another one. So I think we can leverage that by better working together. I feel today that there is a bit of a, the government's doing its stuff on the side, the business are doing their stuff on their side. I think we would have much more value altogether by working together. And there's nothing wrong. It's not about I'm managing your business, you're managing the government. I think we're managing a country we all want to be successful. Should be a partnership to say, how can I help you? How can you help me? And it's not about me. It's about, creating more job, creating more value for the country. The reality is the private, creates a lot of the job in this country, and I think we can do better.
Yeah. Well, speaking of doing better, you saw the Business Council of Canada issued a report a little while ago called Security and Prosperity, which called for Canada to establish an actual defense industrial base.
Really?
The idea of being more integrated with not just the United States, but more broadly our allies where we can be. You've been very outspoken about Canada's defense industry and the role of Canadian companies. We've heard a bit of that already. What do you want to see done?
I think, exactly what I just said. We should put a plan together. And, I'm responsible for my company. If at the end of the day I'm not capable of doing it, I won't say that we're capable. If we can, we can. If we can't, we can't. Mm-hmm. But I think there's so much strength in our country about innovation, about very capable people, on the technology front that like to take problems and solve them. Like we're going to be talking in the next coming weeks about how do we sort out the border security and things like that. That's a subject. There's all kind of things we can help with, but we should work these issues not when they happen. We should be much more proactive and say, what do we need, as I said earlier, in 5, 7, 10 years down the road so that we work on it today. And the Americans are an example for that. Like we won a contract a year ago, last December, a program called 80s. We're doing the research on this. We're doing the technology. We're creating their next airplane, for surveillance, that's going to be like the new top of the league. And we are Bombardier as Canadian contributing to that for the most of it. And you know what they do after? So this is going to create job in the U.S. because a lot of the systems come from the U.S. We provide the airplane. I have also an operation down in Kansas where we're going to modify the airplane for that operation. But then after, the U.S. government's going to go and knock on the door of the airline and say, you should buy that product if you want to be integrated with us and be able to communicate. So this is going to create job in the U.S. again. So likely on this one, we're going to be creating job in Canada too. But why don't we do the same thing? We could do that, working together ahead, test the product. So they do invest. The Army, I'm telling you right now, is paying all the research and everything. But they know that it's an investment that will help their Army to be, of course, at the top. But at the same time, they know that it's going to create job in the long run in the United States. We could do the same thing. We could do the same thing.
I've often heard CEOs say that they feel it's almost like they're handicapped to be Canadian with their own government, that governments reward other companies to come into there and compete. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a fair thing. We always talk about amongst ourselves, CEO, and sometimes you look at, what we would do, to attract foreign company. not even to have their head office here, but just an operation, or they say they have the North American operation. But clearly, they will have a different approach, I would say, with them. I think sometimes we're being taken for granted. And I think they say, oh, they're here. We don't need to take care of them. They're not going anywhere, but we need to attract other people. But to be honest, I think if we would take all the money right now that is being spent on foreign company and look with our different champion and say, if we would put that money at your disposition, I think we could create even more quality job.
I feel like Canadians would agree with you, but the narrative coming from our political leaders is we're the bad guys. The CEOs are the bad guys.
Yeah. And I don't know why is that. I think we need to work again together. We have different roles. Why is it that we cannot dream about Bombardier? We're committed to this country. I'm Canadian. My kids are here. My family grew up here for hundreds of years now. We've been here. But, why is it that we're not dreaming about Bombardier not creating 33,000 jobs, but 100? But ask me the question and ask me what I need to do that. But there's things I could do to get there. But maybe we need a bit of help. And we're committed to this country. We're going to be here probably in 25 years, 50 years around. But I think we could help a big portion of that growth with the existing champion.
Yeah, and I think that Canadians certainly would be conscious that if they felt that the Americans or the Brazilians or the Spanish or the French or the Germans take care of their own, stand up for their own,
Clearly.
Why would we penalize our own?
Absolutely. And I don't know, an example of that.
Odd Canadian trait.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that the government, I think, needs to ask themselves. Like the luxury tax is an example of that. Today, and I've said that to the government, I said, we're 2 years into this. We were selling about 10 airplanes a year in Canada. Now we're selling about 3 to 4 because people don't want to pay the tax. But the reality is the 6 or 7 airplane less that I do are less job at the plant. Okay? What is even worse, Goldie, is we would have paid more taxes to the government if I would have produced 10. So they are losing money. And I'm losing opportunity to build more airplane and creating more jobs in this country. So sometimes I think they need to go back and say, okay, maybe they tried something and fair. We thought that this was going to happen. I hate to say that I think we were right, but I think we were. And 2 years later, I think they have the right to reassess and say it doesn't work. Maybe we need to go back. So especially right now in the context of the tariff threat.
Well, sometimes, we talked about failure leading to good outcomes. And maybe this will be the case. Let me move on to something else that I know is important to businesses here in Canada and chief executives to take this very seriously, and that is the role that innovation is playing in the climate, the need for sustainable aviation in your case, the challenge of there's a lot of challenges. I'm pretty sure I don't want to fly on a plane that's doing solar or wind. What are you going to do to
That's a good
decarbonize air travel? How do you do it?
So I think when you look at it, first of all, there is a history in our industry of reducing emission. If you go back and take an airplane that was flying in the 60s, 60 years later, we probably burn half of the fuel we used to burn then. Okay, so it's always been part of our journey as an industry to reduce emission because it's good business for us, reduce utilization, it reduces the cost of operation, and of course the owner of the airplane likes it. So that's important to know. Today, we're all committed to get to carbon neutral by 2050, and there is real initiative. I'm spending about 80% of my R&D budget today, 80%, 80, on reducing emissions. Like, I don't know if you go on YouTube right now and you say Bombardier EcoJet, we've redesigned the shape of the airplane completely ourselves. And just changing the shape of the airplane will reduce the emission by 20%.
Yeah.
So this is pure innovation, Goldie. This is something we're using our own money of the company to do that because we know it's going to be more and more important for our customer.
We're now taping this in the middle of December, just before the Christmas break. A new president, former President Trump, will take office on January the 20th. He has already threatened 25% tariffs on Canada and other countries as well. First of all, how would 25% tariffs impact Bombardier and by extension Bombardier's customers and or place in Canada? And then I'll ask you more broadly, what do we do about this issue?
The honest answer is that it will have an impact, okay, at 25%. But then is it going to be 25? How long is it going to last? So there's different scenario that, of course, as a responsible CEO in my company, my executive team, we're looking into. The reality is Bombardier is significant in Canada, but I'm also significant in the U.S. I have 2,800 suppliers in the U.S., based in 46 states. okay? I'm spending about $3 billion a year in the U.S., buying goods that cross the border, come here, put them on the assembly line, install them on the airplane, like engines, an example. I'm buying engines from Honeywell. I'm buying engines from GE. They're all American company. I'm buying avionics from RTX. So actually, when we look at the math, if I have to do layoff because I'm doing less airplane and things like that, it's going to hurt here. It's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt the country. It's going to hurt my employee, everybody. But they're going to have as much impact on the other side of the border. So that's why I'm saying at some point, common sense should prevail. And somebody's going to look into that and say, okay, I'm doing damages here and I'm going to do damages here. I'm going to collect tariff maybe at the end of the day, or maybe I'm not going to collect tariff if I'm not selling that many airplanes in the U.S. So I'm not even sure here who's going to win what. But I think to go to your question, so that's my own case. But I think as a country right now, we need to cool down. We'll need strong leadership. And leadership right now is not like 10 leader or 20 leader going all around saying one thing, and the other guy saying something different. It's time to be unified, and should not be a public negotiation, okay? I know that this is what they're going to do, but I think we should keep it for ourselves, and we should build our leverage point too. This is a negotiation, guys, nothing more, okay? He's doing it a certain way. There's other way to do it also. But I think it's purely about how do I create leverage point? And we do have a lot of leverage point, guys. We're 25% of the oil they're using. We're exporting electricity every year, like massively,
They want our critical minerals.
Exactly. So how do we leverage that to say, hey, you got leverage. It's nice that you do it socially because it gets more people. But here's the fact, okay? How do we make a deal? Because that's what he wants to make. He wants to make a deal. There'll be election in the U.S. in 2 years from now. It's coming very fast. He has a lot of power right now to do it because he controls, the Senate and the chamber. Yeah. And he needs to make it happen in the next 2 years. He doesn't know what's going to happen in 2 years at the election, especially if we put these tariffs. He has a very high risk that inflation is going to go up. Yeah. People won't be happy. Yeah. So he has a short period of time. I think, we're in the crunch of it right now. He's getting ready. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a pragmatic approach, but we need who's going to be at the table, what's the mandate, and make sure that everybody else is going to say, okay, I'm supportive of that thing. So now leadership is at a critical point, and we need that leadership now, not in 2 years.
Yeah. Do you have a point of view on this debate taking place about sort of a trilateral agreement versus a bilateral agreement?
I think Mexico will be important. I think, over the years, the reality, Goldie, is we have integrated our supply chain.
Exactly.
The first agreement happened in the 80s. And aerospace is an example. The car industry is the same. I got parts that go back and forth.
Railway.
Railway, exactly. We build things in Mexico. They come to Canada. They go back to the U.S. They come back here. This is going to be like a huge issue if we all start to split it. So I think we've made that agreement 30, 40 years ago now, the first one. And I think because of the rules that were in place, we've integrated our supply chain significantly. So I think clearly the best approach right now is to keep all the three countries in.
Yeah. Well, I want to go off the U.S. for a minute here. And just as we wind down, I want to ask you, because I'm a very proud Albertan, and I was raised taught by Peter Lougheed in one of my courses, and he would always say, my best friend at every First Ministers Conference was the Premier of Quebec.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it'd be a great opportunity for a leader from Quebec, someone like yourself, to just share with our listeners, how's the province doing? How do you feel about Quebec?
I think Quebec is doing fine. We have our own issues, like the health system, and I think we're not the only one. There's always, that tension between Ottawa and Quebec, so we live the same thing. But I think we're not unique also in that regards. I think overall Quebec is doing fine. If you look at the unemployment, if you look at the growth of the economy, I was talking earlier about, we have good university system, educated people. We have our own issue. But guys, I was telling someone the other day also, we have our issue in this country. But at the same time, it's a safe country. Yes, I pay a lot of taxes, but I can walk anywhere in Montreal at night and I'm not in danger. There's not many cities in the world, including in the U.S., that you can say that. And I think we're unique in that regards, that I think we've kept peace in this country. And I think we need to preserve that. And I think sometimes I'm concerned about, the rich becoming richer and the poor poorer. So that's something we need to think about. I think the government right now, though, is not doing it the right way. Like luxury tax is an example. It's true that if you go in front of the crowd and you say, we're going to tax the rich more, everybody's going to say, great idea. But at the same time, if they're buying less airplane in our case, and they're creating less job in the plant, I'm not sure we've won anything, okay? So I think, we need to find the right balance, and we need to keep that peace. That is, I think, dear to us.
This is the danger I've always said about populism. Great politics, horrible public policy.
Clearly.
Be careful what you wish for. Okay.
Clearly.
One thing I will say about chief executives, there's not one I've met who has not told me that they see life half glass full, that they're eternal optimists. So tell me, what are you optimistic about today, despite everything going on? What are you feeling good about?
I'm feeling good, but first of all, the trend of my business is very favorable. Business aviation has been adapted over the year. And that's another example. No, I understand that not everybody can fly private, okay? But it should not be a shame to say, hey, we're doing business jet.
If you're not doing it, someone else will be doing it.
Exactly. First of all, someone else. But the reality is the fact that I'm building 150 a year of these jets, I'm creating 34,000 jobs in this country.
Well, that was all the easy part of the podcast. The hard part is the last question, where I'm going to do some rapid fire questions at you. Your favorite part of Montreal?
The old Montreal.
Favorite place to travel?
London.
Your favorite music?
My favorite music is jazz.
One piece of advice for young people who are listening to this podcast.
Always stay grounded,
Says a guy in aviation. I love it.
Yeah. No, but seriously, you're right. But I think, the guys know me for one thing at Bombardier is, yes, I can go talk to my customer, but I can go in the shop, every day, which I do a lot. And I will always talk with my employee and being equal to equal. So I think staying close to people, being accessible as a leader is very, very important and modest.
You're very strongly involved in Montreal Centrad, which is effectively the United Way, as people know it. Do you have any memories of any significant impacts you've seen from that charitable work?
Oh, I've been involved since 1998 in Centrad, so it's going to be close to 30 years and more than 25 now. And I've seen so many things, that this organization is doing to help association. We're supporting about 350, 360 different groups. And I've seen real life example of impacting people's life. I remember that lady that explained me, she said, hey, my husband left, I have 3 kids, I was left with no apartment, no job, no nothing. And Centraide helped me, they gave me for about a year a place to stay. And I was there with my 3 kids. And you know what? They helped me actually to start my own business.
Wow.
I said, wow, this is quite an example. So those things, are important. And when I said, if we want to keep social peace in this country, those are the things we need to be interested by.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, the hardest question of all.
Go ahead.
Who's your favorite Montreal Canadian of all time?
Guy Lafleur.
I knew you were going to say that.
I was going to say that. It's too easy, but we were winning the Stanley
There's
Cup
so
in the
many
70s.
great Canadians. You have
I
to
was a
admit
kid
that.
at the time with my number 10 in the back, so of course.
The flower. Listen, you've been terrific. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you,
Great
Goldy.
to have you here, Eric, and really appreciate you sharing.
Thank you. Same to you. Thank you so much.
Éric Martel is the president and CEO of Bombardier. If you would like to hear more of our Speaking of Business conversations with innovators, leaders, and entrepreneurs, why not subscribe to our podcast? Search for Speaking of Business wherever you get your podcasts, or simply go to our website at thebusinesscouncil.ca. Yes, it's thebusinesscouncil.ca. Until next time, I'm Goldy Hyder. Thanks for joining us.